On a cold morning in Newark, a struggling black father stops at a grocery store, counting every dollar in his nearly empty wallet. As he heads to his truck, he spots a little girl sitting alone on the curb, her face streaked with tears. He knows getting involved could mean trouble. People like him don't always get the benefit of the doubt. But as she looks up at him scared and lost, he makes a choice. What he doesn't know is that this small act of kindness will set off a chain of events that could change his life forever. Marcus Carter sat on the edge of his worn-out couch, his head resting in his hands as the first rays of morning light slipped through the cracked blinds of his tiny apartment. The air was thick with the faint smell of old leather and motor oil, a scent that used to mean security. Back when he had a real job, back when he was somebody, 3 years at Henderson's Auto Repair had given him purpose. But when the shop went under, so did his stability. Now he scraped by doing whatever work he could find, hauling boxes at the docks, fixing up busted air conditioners, cleaning out garages for people who barely acknowledged his presence. The money was never enough. The bills stacked up faster than he could pay them, and the landlord's friendly reminders were getting less friendly by the day. 2 months behind on rent, one more missed payment, and he and his son Jordan would be out on the street. The apartment itself was a testament to struggle, the peeling wallpaper, the faint scent of mildew, the dim overhead light that flickered when the wind blew too hard outside. This wasn't the home Marcus had imagined for his son. Jordan deserved more than this. A backyard to play in, a warm bed that didn't creak every time he rolled over, a fridge that wasn't almost always empty. But reality didn't give a damn about what a man deserved. It only cared about what he could afford. And right now, Marcus could barely afford a loaf of bread. With a heavy sigh, he pushed himself up and walked over to the small kitchenette. The fridge hummed softly, its contents depressingly bare. A half-empty carton of milk, a few slices of bread, a jar of peanut butter that was more air than spread. He grabbed the bread and a butter knife, spreading the peanut butter as thinly as possible, stretching it the way he wished he could stretch his last few dollars. "Jordan," he called, his voice gentle but firm. "Breakfast, buddy." A few seconds later, Jordan shuffled in, still dressed in his oversized hand-me-down pajamas. He was 8 but too thin for his age, his curly hair slightly tousled from sleep. Despite everything, his dark brown eyes still held that quiet optimism that both inspired and broke Marcus's heart. Jordan climbed onto one of the wobbly kitchen chairs and picked up the toast. He didn't complain. He never did. "Thanks, Dad." Marcus sat across from him, watching as his son took slow, careful bites. "Big day at school?" he asked, forcing his tone to stay light. Jordan nodded. "Yeah, Miss Williams said we're doing an art project. She said I could draw whatever I want." His eyes brightened. "I'm going to draw a big house with a backyard, and a swing and a dog, a big one, like the ones in those movies." Marcus swallowed the lump forming in his throat. He wanted to promise Jordan that one day they'd have that house, that backyard, that dog. But promises didn't pay rent, and dreams didn't keep the lights on. Instead, he reached over, ruffling his son's hair. "Sounds like a masterpiece." Jordan grinned, then took another bite before tilting his head. "Dad?" "Yeah, bud? Do you think things will get better?" Marcus forced a smile. "Of course." The words felt hollow, but he said them anyway because if he lost hope, what did Jordan have left? The boy nodded as if he believed it more than Marcus did. "I think so too." Marcus exhaled slowly, running a hand down his face. He needed to figure something out fast. The landlord had given him until Friday to come up with at least half of what he owed. That was 2 days. 2 days to find $600 when his pockets barely had 6. His truck, his damn truck, was another problem. The old Ford sat outside like a reminder of better days, its rusted frame barely holding together. The engine had been making a wheezing sound lately, and last night, the transmission had slipped on his way home from a gig. If it died on him completely, so did his chances of getting work. But fixing it would cost money he didn't have. Jordan finished his toast, licking the peanut butter off his fingers before hopping down from his chair. "Can I go get my backpack?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah, go on." As Jordan disappeared into their shared bedroom, Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He was running out of time, running out of options. And what scared him most was the thought that Maybe, just maybe, he was also running out of hope. The morning air was crisp as Marcus tightened his coat around his shoulders, his breath visible in the cool autumn breeze. The city always felt different this early, quieter, almost peaceful. If you ignored the distant wail of sirens and the occasional rumble of a passing bus. He walked beside Jordan, his son's small hand gripping his own, the two of them making their way down cracked sidewalks toward the school. The boy chatted about his art project, about the house he would draw, the dog he would name Max, the swing set he could almost feel swaying in the wind. Marcus nodded along, his mind elsewhere, tangled in the weight of unpaid bills and a truck that might not last another week. But he listened because Jordan deserved that much. At the school entrance, he crouched down to his son's level, adjusting the straps on his worn-out backpack. "Have a good day, champ." Jordan grinned. "You too, Dad." Marcus watched as he ran off, disappearing into a crowd of kids. For a fleeting moment, a sense of warmth cut through the cold reality of his morning. Then with a sigh, he turned away and headed toward the grocery store a few blocks down. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he moved through the aisles. With practiced precision, a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, each item carefully chosen, mentally calculated. He pulled out his wallet at the register, the sight of his remaining cash making his stomach tighten, just enough to last until Friday if nothing went wrong. As he stepped outside, the sunlight had grown sharper, bouncing off windshields in the near-empty parking lot. He adjusted the plastic grocery bag in his grip, heading toward his truck when something stopped him, a small figure sitting alone on the curb near the entrance, shoulders shaking with soft, hiccuping sobs. A little girl, no older than 6, blonde curls tied into pigtails, dressed in a pale pink coat that looked too clean. Too new for this part of town. Marcus slowed his steps. This wasn't his problem. Kids got lost all the time. A parent would show up any minute, frantic, searching. He had his own troubles to deal with, rent, bills, a truck that needed fixing before it gave out completely. But then he thought of Jordan. If it were his boy sitting there, eyes red and swollen, scared out of his mind, would he want someone to just walk away? A curse slipped under his breath as he changed direction, his boots scuffing against the pavement. He crouched down a few feet from her, keeping his voice gentle. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay?" The girl flinched at first, shrinking into herself, eyes wide with fear as she took him in. Marcus knew that look, the way her little hands gripped the fabric of her coat, the way her breathing hitched as she stared up at him. She was scared, but not just because she was lost. She was scared of him. His stomach twisted. This wasn't new. He'd seen it before, the way some people clutched their purses tighter when he passed them on the street, the way store clerks watched him longer than the other customers. But seeing it in the eyes of a child stung in a way he wasn't prepared for. He took a slow breath, kept his distance. "I won't hurt you. I promise, just, you look like you need some help." The girl sniffled, her lower lip trembling. I can't find my mommy." Marcus nodded, choosing his next words carefully. "Okay, we'll figure it out." He gestured toward the bench a few feet away. "Want to sit down for a minute?" She hesitated, but after a moment she nodded, wiping at her eyes with the sleeve of her coat before following him over. He sat at the far end of the bench, giving her space, waiting as she gathered herself. "What's your name?" "Sophie," she whispered. "All right, Sophie. Do you know your mom's phone number?" She sniffled again, nodding quickly as she dug into her little backpack. Pulling out a crumpled piece of paper, Marcus took it carefully, smoothing it out to find a phone number scrawled in messy handwriting. He pulled his phone from his pocket, fingers dialing as he glanced at the address below the number. It wasn't far. The call rang once, twice. Voicemail. He frowned, trying again. Still nothing. Beside him, Sophie twisted her hands in her lap, her breathing growing shallow. Marcus exhaled, glancing between her and the paper. This was the part where he should call the police, let them handle it. But the thought of this little girl sitting in some station, waiting for her mother to come find her, scared and alone, didn't sit right with him. He looked at the address again. 10 minutes away. He made a decision. "Okay," he said, standing. "I'm going to take you home, all right? We'll find your mom together." Sophie hesitated, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Marcus knew what she was thinking. He was a stranger, a big, unfamiliar man in a city where little girls were taught not to trust men like him. He crouched down, meeting her gaze. "I get it," he said softly. "You don't have to come with me. But I'm not going to leave you here alone." He gestured to the parking lot. "We can wait for a police officer if that makes you feel safer. Or if you want, you can sit in my truck while I drive. And I won't even start the engine until you're buckled in. Your call." She bit her lip, considering. Then after a long pause, she whispered, "Okay." Marcus nodded. He led her to his truck, making sure she climbed in and buckled up before he started the engine. As they pulled onto the street, Sophie shifted slightly in her seat, watching him with cautious curiosity. "You're nice," she said after a moment. Marcus let out a quiet laugh. "You don't even know me, kid." She shrugged, looking out the window. "You didn't leave me." The words hit him harder than they should have. He didn't answer, just kept driving, the weight of them settling deep in his chest. The drive was quiet except for the steady hum of the old engine and the occasional sniffle from Sophie. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, hands gripping the wheel, his mind racing through the possibilities of what he was about to walk into. Maybe her mother was already out looking for her. Maybe she had just gotten distracted at the store and panicked when she couldn't find Sophie. Or maybe his stomach tightened. Maybe it was worse than that. Sophie fidgeted in her seat, her tiny hands gripping the straps of her backpack. "Is my mommy going to be mad?" she asked, her voice small. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "I don't think so, kid. She's probably just worried sick." Sophie chewed her lip, her gaze dropping to her lap. "I didn't mean to get lost." Marcus exhaled, forcing some softness into his voice. "I know it happens." The address led them to a neighborhood that looked like a different world from where Marcus lived. The streets lined with trees, the lawns neatly trimmed, the houses standing tall with their perfectly painted fences and expensive cars parked in the driveways. His truck stuck out here, its rusted edges and faded paint like a scar against something pristine. He slowed in front of a two-story house with white shutters and a stone pathway leading to the front door. Before he could even shift into park, the front door flew open, and a woman burst out onto the porch, her dark coat billowing as she ran down the steps. "Sophie," Sophie gasped, her tiny fingers fumbling with the seatbelt as she scrambled to unbuckle herself. Marcus barely had time to put the truck in park before the girl flung the door open and ran toward her mother. The woman fell to her knees, arms wide, catching Sophie in a tight embrace. "Oh my God, baby," she choked, her voice shaking. "I was so scared." Sophie clung to her, her small frame trembling. I couldn't find you, Mommy." The woman pulled back just enough to cup her daughter's face, pressing frantic kisses to her forehead. I'm here. Then she turned her head, her gaze locking onto Marcus, and for a second something flashed across her face. Relief. Confusion, then something harder, something wary. She stood slowly, keeping one arm wrapped around Sophie as she took a hesitant step forward. Marcus recognized the look immediately. It was the same look he got when he walked into a store he'd never been in before. The same look some people gave him when he passed them on the sidewalk at night, that moment of hesitation, of calculation, like they weren't sure whether he was a problem or not. His chest tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. He wasn't about to let this woman make him feel like he had done something wrong. "I found her outside a grocery store," he said, his voice even. She was crying. She had this. He pulled the crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and held it out. Tried calling. No answer. The woman hesitated before reaching for it, her fingers brushing against his as she took it. She glanced down, then back up at him. She exhaled sharply, rubbing her free hand over her forehead. "I didn't even realize she was gone until I got home. I must have lost her in the parking lot while I was putting the bags in the car. I thought she was right behind me." Her voice wavered, and for the first time, Marcus saw past the guarded expression. She was shaken, guilt settling into the lines of her face. "It happens," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure why he felt the need to reassure her. Maybe because he knew what it was like to feel like you'd failed your kid. She swallowed hard, glancing down at Sophie, then back at him. "Thank you," she said, the words slower this time, more careful. "Really, I don't know what I would have done if..." She shook her head, stopping herself. Marcus nodded once. "No problem." He turned slightly, ready to head back to his truck, but Sophie's small voice stopped him. "Mr. Marcus?" He looked back at her. The little girl hesitated, then took a step toward him, her tiny fingers fiddling with the hem of her coat. "Thank you for not leaving me." Something in his chest twisted. Marcus crouched down, leveling his gaze with hers. "You're welcome, kid." Sophie bit her lip, then suddenly reached forward, wrapping her arms around his neck in a quick but fierce hug. It caught him off guard, but before he could react, she pulled away and ran back to her mother's side. The woman, Sophie's mother, watched them, something unreadable in her expression now. Then she shifted, standing up straighter. "What's your name?" "Marcus Carter." She nodded slowly, like she was committing it to memory. "I'm Isabel Bennett." She hesitated, then added, "If there's anything I can do to repay you." "You don't owe me anything," Marcus said, cutting her off. He wasn't interested in some rich lady's guilt money. She looked like she wanted to argue, but after a moment she just nodded. "All right." Marcus turned without another word, walking back to his truck. As he climbed in, he could still feel Isabel's eyes on him, watching as he pulled away. Marcus barely made it to the end of the street before his grip tightened around the wheel, his jaw clenching as he forced out a breath. He should have been used to it by now. That look, that hesitation, that moment where a person decided whether they saw him as a man or as a problem. He had done the right thing. He had gotten a lost little girl back to her mother. And still, for a brief second, that woman had looked at him like she wasn't sure if he was the reason her daughter had gone missing, or the reason she had made it home safe. The worst part, he had expected it. He turned onto the main road, the weight of it pressing into his chest as he drove back toward his side of town, the rust on his truck, the flickering streetlights, the uneven pavement. This was where he belonged. Not in neighborhoods with perfect lawns and houses that looked like they belonged in magazines. He knew better than to think he'd ever fit into a world like that. By the time he pulled into his usual parking spot outside his apartment, the sun had started to dip behind the skyline, the orange glow casting long shadows across the lot. He sat there for a moment, staring at the dashboard, trying to shake the feeling that clung to him. He had more important things to worry about: Jordan, rent, figuring out how to stretch what little cash he had left until his next gig. He didn't have the luxury of dwelling on things that weren't going to change. He grabbed the grocery bag from the passenger seat, stepped out, and locked the truck behind him. As he made his way toward the building, a sleek black car rolled into the lot, its polished exterior looking painfully out of place next to the beat-up sedans and old pickups. Marcus barely spared it a glance until the driver's door opened and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Marcus's rent. Marcus slowed his steps, his muscles tensing on instinct. The man's gaze landed on him immediately, sharp and assessing. Then he smiled, controlled. Polite, the kind of expression Marcus had seen on businessmen who shook hands while making deals they had no intention of honoring. "Mr. Carter." The voice was smooth, confident. Marcus didn't answer right away. He took a slow, measured look at the man, then at the car, then back again. "Who's asking?" The man extended a hand. "Gregory Bennett. My wife told me what you did for my daughter." Marcus glanced at the outstretched hand but didn't take it. His grip tightened around the grocery bag instead. He didn't know what this was, but he already didn't like it. Gregory dropped his hand, unbothered. "I wanted to thank you personally." Marcus exhaled through his nose. He didn't have time for this. "Your wife already thanked me." "I'm sure she did," Gregory said, his voice still even, still measured. "But I wanted to do more than just say the words." And there it was. Marcus let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Look, man, I'm not interested in whatever it is you think you owe me. I did what any decent person would have done." Gregory studied him for a moment, then nodded like he had expected that answer. "Fair enough, but I wasn't talking about a reward." He gestured toward the car. "I was talking about an opportunity." Marcus frowned. "Opportunity?" Gregory took a step closer, lowering his voice slightly. "I own a construction company, Bennett Developments. We are always looking for people with the kind of work ethic you showed today. I wanted to offer you a job." Marcus blinked, caught off guard. A job? He had been expecting a check, some well-meaning attempt at charity wrapped up in gratitude. But this wasn't what he had braced himself for. He folded his arms. "You don't even know me." Gregory's smile didn't waver. I know enough. I know that instead of walking away, you made sure a scared little girl got home safe. I know you didn't ask for anything in return. I know you could have used the money if I'd offered it. But you didn't want a handout. He tilted his head slightly. That tells me you're the kind of man I want working for me. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to push back, to poke holes in whatever logic this man was using to justify showing up here. But the truth was he needed the work, and not just any work, steady work. Something that might actually get him out of the hole he'd been stuck in for months. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, hesitating. What's the catch? Gregory chuckled. No catch. Just an honest job with honest pay. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, holding it out. Think about it. Give me a call if you're interested. Marcus stared at the card for a long moment before finally taking it. He turned it over between his fingers, the weight of it feeling heavier than it should. Gregory nodded once. Hope to hear from you, Mr. Carter. Then, without another word, he turned and climbed back into the car, pulling away as smoothly as he had arrived. Marcus stood there, the card still in his hand, his mind running in circles. A job, a real job. Something about it felt too easy, too sudden. But then again, maybe it wasn't. Maybe this was just one of those rare moments where life threw a man a rope. Instead of another damn anchor, he exhaled, shoved the card into his pocket and headed inside. Marcus sat at the small kitchen table later that night, the business card resting in front of him. Like it was some kind of puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. He had flipped it over at least a dozen times, running his thumb along the embossed lettering as if the answer to all his problems might suddenly appear in the fine print. Jordan had fallen asleep in their shared bedroom hours ago, his soft breaths the only sound filling the cramped apartment. Marcus had meant to call Bennett back as soon as he got inside, but something had kept him from picking up the phone. Maybe it was the nagging doubt in the back of his mind, the part of him that said, opportunities like this didn't come knocking on doors like his without a price. Maybe it was the exhaustion, the weight of every failure, every setback, every time he had gotten close to something good, only to have it slip right through his fingers. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the fear of hoping for too much. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face before finally reaching for his phone. He dialed the number, pressing the device to his ear, his heartbeat a steady thud against his ribs as it rang. Once, twice, then a voice answered, smooth and alert despite the late hour. Gregory Bennett. Marcus cleared his throat. It's Marcus Carter. A beat of silence, then, glad to hear it. Be at the site by 7. I'll have the foreman, Hank Davis, show you around. And just like that, it was done. No long-winded speeches, no second-guessing, just a man who had made up his mind. Marcus hung up, exhaling slowly as he stared at the phone in his hand. He had no idea what he was walking into, but there was only one way to find out. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Marcus pulled into the construction site, his truck groaning in protest as he parked near the rows of heavy machinery. The place was already alive with movement, men in hard hats shouting over the hum of equipment, the metallic clang of steel beams being hoisted into place, the rhythmic pounding of hammers echoing through the air. He stepped out, adjusting his jacket against the crisp morning air, scanning the site until he spotted a stocky man with a salt and pepper beard barking orders near the supply shed. Hank Davis? The foreman turned, his sharp eyes raking over Marcus like he was assessing the worth of a tool that might break the first time he used it. You Carter? Marcus nodded. Hank grunted, unimpressed. Bennett says you're a hard worker. Marcus met his gaze, unwavering. I am. Hank studied him for a long moment, then jerked his head toward a stack of lumber. Good, 'cause we don't got room for anybody who ain't. The first day was brutal. The kind of work that left muscles aching in places Marcus had forgotten he even had. But he kept his head down, followed orders, learned the rhythm of the job. He lifted, hauled, measured, cut whatever was thrown his way. He handled it without complaint. By noon, his shirt was drenched with sweat despite the cool breeze, his gloves caked in dust and grit. Hank watched him work, arms crossed over his broad chest. At one point, he walked over and handed Marcus a bottle of water without a word. It wasn't an approval, not yet, but it wasn't a dismissal either. As the weeks passed, Marcus found his footing. the skepticism from some of the other workers, especially the ones who had been there long enough to question why. Bennett had brought in an outsider, began to fade as he proved himself day after day. He was always the first to arrive, the last to leave. He took on the worst jobs without complaint, asked questions when he didn't know something, and learned fast. Slowly, respect replaced doubt. Then came Friday afternoon. The crew was wrapping up when Bennett himself showed up at the site. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a button-down with the sleeves rolled up. But he still carried that same air of quiet authority. He scanned the site before his gaze landed on Marcus. "Walk with me," Bennett said, already turning toward the edge of the lot. Marcus hesitated only for a second before following. Bennett stopped near a stack of steel beams, looking out over the framework of the building taking shape. "You're doing good work," he said after a moment. Marcus shrugged, "Just doing the job." Bennett nodded like he appreciated the lack of false modesty. "That's why I want to offer you something more." Marcus frowned. "More?" Bennett turned to face him fully. "There's a management training program for employees who show leadership potential. I think you'd be a good fit." The words hit harder than Marcus expected. He had been so focused on just surviving, on keeping his head above water, that he hadn't even considered what came next. A job was one thing, a career, a real chance to build something for himself. For Jordan, that was something else entirely. He let out a slow breath. "Why me?" Bennett's lips curved slightly. "Because I see potential. And because men like us, we don't get handed a lot of doors. Sometimes, when one opens, you've got to be willing to step through it." Marcus looked away, jaw tightening. He had spent years pushing against doors that refused to budge, swallowing disappointment, forcing himself to believe that grinding through each day was the best he could hope for. But standing here, hearing those words, "Sometimes when one opens, you've got to be willing to step through it," he felt something shift inside him. He turned back to Bennett, his decision already made. "All right, I'm in." Bennett nodded, satisfied. "Good. Monday morning, report to the main office. We'll get started." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the site, Marcus climbed into his truck, his body aching but his mind lighter than it had been in months. He drove home, his grip on the wheel firm, a new sense of purpose settling into his bones. When he walked through the front door, Jordan looked up from the floor where he had been drawing, crayons scattered around him. "Hey, Dad," the boy beamed. "Guess what? I finished my picture." Marcus set his lunchbox down and crouched beside his son. Jordan held up the drawing, a house, backyard, a swing set, and a big dog right in the middle. The same dream he had talked about that morning. Marcus swallowed, his throat tight. "Looks good, bud." Jordan studied him for a second. "You look happy." Marcus exhaled, ruffling the boy's curls. "Yeah," he said, voice steady. "I think I am." For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving. He was moving forward.